All right, let me go see if I can round up our congregate folks. Let me go see if I can round up our congregate folks. All right.
Hello, my name is Bobby Kesturi. I'm an assistant professor.
All right, well, I have 1:30 Eastern time on my clock. So we'll go ahead and welcome everyone back to the session. Dr. Chung is teaching right now, so she will be back in a minute or after she's done teaching. Before I pass the microphone to Mary Lou Bailey, who will be our moderator for this session, I just wanted to remind those that are here that this is a panel discussion on kind of best practices in some programs around the country. And we'll have our presentations first, and then we'll have a longer discussion afterwards. So please hold your questions until all the talks have finished. Mary Lou, if you'd like to begin.
Great, thank you. Hi, I'm Mary Lou. I'm a graduate student in applied physics at Yale. I'll be facilitating this session of our meeting. And so I guess without further ado, I'll introduce our first speaker, who is Dr. Simon Spanberg from Georgia Tech. He is an assistant professor in physics at Georgia Tech. He earned his PhD in integrative biology from UC Berkeley in 2008. And his research interests are in neuromechanics, locomotor control, multi-scale physics of the muscle, maneuverability, and computational neuroscience.
Hang on, it's coming back.
Okay, my name is Simon Spanberg. I'm going to represent this collection of faculty from Georgia Tech and talk to you about the best practices that we've been developing. But I also really want to thank everybody for participating in this, because I'm looking forward to learning a lot about the other best practices that we can incorporate into our programs. So the first program that I want to highlight is our RAU program, which has really been led by Jennifer Curtis here on the right, who's a professor in our department. And she's really sort of established a new kind of program where we don't try and use GPA as a threshold, and we try and recruit students in very early by creating special projects for them with their faculty mentors that they can do even after their second year of undergraduate. And this allows us to have a lot more continuity throughout. We also try and recruit a diverse enough cohort such that no one minority group is a minority within the cohort. We also have had a very good couple of staff members who've been involved with this that gives the students over the summer a contact point that's not a faculty member, so they don't feel any judgment if they're having any issues with the program or living in a new place or adjusting to a new environment. We also have these welcoming events that we do, including just simple things like a welcome poster that can feel them like they then belong more into the community that they're coming into. And we've had a number of things where we've tried to develop local contacts with HBCUs and other local institutions for commitment for recruitment. And this allows for really a development of a relationship that can then continue on beyond the actual RU program, which is one of always the problems with these RU programs, is that people sort of come and then they leave and it drops off. So we're trying to continue that along in that case. The second program where we've had a lot of success is generating these VIP teams or vertically integrated projects. This is a program that I've led here at Georgia Tech, where we've created a living dynamical systems team. And these what this is it's a research experience that's integrated into the actual curriculum at Georgia Tech. And what that means is that not only is it a class that they can take, but it's a class that actually counts for major credit in a variety of different majors. And this allows students to engage with research in a way that where they don't have to do extra work or volunteer their time in order to do real meaningful research experiences. In the first 7 years of this program, we've had 75 students go through it, representing 12 majors, although most of the research that's being done involves biophysics. There's a couple of nice things about this where we have a formalized application process, so the students don't have to network ahead of time in order to get into the research experience. They can just go to the web page and apply. And we've also had a lot more accessibility to it because it leverages the large infrastructure. There's actually many VIP teams here on campus. It's a system that was set up in engineering, but we're using it now for sciences. And it gives this sort of tiered mentoring where we have a lot of undergraduates involved in it. And this program has actually led to a number of undergraduates being involved in a paper. So the first paper from this program has just come out where we've been doing these perturbations of the oscillations of hawk moths to sort of test whether insects operate around resonance. And Ryan Gemalier here was the lead undergraduate from the team, and you can see that the VIP team was actually an author on this forthcoming paper, and all the members of it were down here. So we had 12 undergraduate authors on this paper. The last thing that we've been doing is having a variety of involvement, both from the faculty, where we do community and education support, and from student-led groups, the Graduate Association of Physicists, and especially our Women in Physics community. And this has created a lot of on-the-ground sort of community involvement where we have both mentorship, active learning opportunities like this Lunch and Learn program, new introductory classes for people outside of physics coming in, demystifying physics for them and making it more relevant to their majors, and providing leadership and direct mentorship for new graduate students. So those are the things that we've done here at Georgia Tech. I'm looking forward to hearing what all y'all have done at the other institutions. Thank you.
Awesome, great. And yeah, we'll have a discussion at the end, so we'll just go to the next flash talk. Speaking next is Dr. Arpita Upadhyaya so Arpita received her PhD from the University of Notre Dame and then worked at the Department of Mechanical Engineering at MIT before being awarded an MIT Pappalardo Fellowship in the Department of Physics. She spent a year in the Department of Cell and Developmental Biology at UNC Chapel Hill before joining the UMD faculty in 2006. She received a Sloan Research Fellowship in 2008 and was promoted to associate professor in 2014. Her research uses quantitative imaging, biophysical measurements, and computational analysis to study cellular mechanics and the physical forces that enable a cell to sense and respond to its physical environment, in particular cells of the immune system and cancer cells.
Hello, I'm Arpita Upadhyay, professor in the physics department and the Institute for Physical Science and Technology at the University of Maryland, College Park. Today I will talk about some of the efforts in diversity, inclusion, and equity at the University of Maryland that we have been involved in. The faculty and their lab members that comprise Physics of Living Systems Student Research Network have been engaged over the years with ongoing multiple efforts at UMD aimed at enhancing diversity and bringing inclusiveness. Many of these efforts have been student-led. These activities are varied and span several stages across the pipeline. Some are long-standing efforts aimed at reaching middle and high school students, while others are geared towards minority undergraduate student outreach. Physics is Fun activity is a series of free public lecture demonstration programs geared towards a high school and middle school audience and aims to educate and entertain on a wide variety of fun topics in physics. The Physics of Summer Girls program is long-running and comprised of 1 to 2 week sessions focusing on various topics in physics for rising 9th grade students and 10 to 12th grade students. Topics ranging from classical physics to modern physics to biophysics. Typical activities involve hands-on experiments, lab tours, fun physics demos, diverse talks, workshops on communicating science, and most importantly, a community building activities helping these students to build skills, knowledge, and create a sense of belonging within the physics community. Local area high schools in Prince George's County have a large proportion of URM. And so these activities provide a natural mechanism of outreach and broadening participation in physics. There's also an amazing initiative that is graduate student-led, the Grad Map program, Graduate Resources Advancing Diversity and with Maryland Astronomy and Physics. It's several students and PoLS affiliated faculty members have been engaged in this. The program involves fall collaborative seminar series, which includes visit to local HBCUs and MSIs, as has been listed over here, an open house of research, a week-long winter workshop that initiates students into hands-on research, and finally a summer scholars program which allows students an in-depth research experience with several groups. This also provides graduate students with an opportunity to mentor students and meaningfully engage in a program that improves diversities. This provides undergraduate students an exposure into various topics into physics. At a larger scale, UMD has partnered with NIST to provide professional and networking activities for regional minority serving institutions. There's the Conference for Undergraduate Underrepresented Minorities in Physics, the CU2 MIP. There's been a few of these events in the past, and there's another upcoming one in January 2021. This allows undergraduate students to participate in a professional level conference, connect with others in physics with whom they can share experiences, get advice and ideas. And this allows to create and foster networks for underrepresented minority students and allows them to get into research collaborations, think about how to address social injustice issues. And this conference also raises awareness and explores professional opportunities. The PoLS network at UMD is planning to participate in this conference in 2021 to introduce modules on physics of living systems. In summary, PoLS network at UMD is engaged in a number of efforts at all stages, including the ones I talked about, and we would like to further expand connections with local K-12 schools, and we'd like to partner with other PoLS nodes to enhance our efforts to be more inclusive. Since we work at the intersection of physics and biology, this may broaden students' perception and make entry into physics and STEM fields more widely accessible and equitable for students from all underrepresented groups. Finally, I'd like to thank some of the people listed here that I've been having recent discussions with and look forward to continuing to work with everyone and get new ideas on how to increase diversity. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Doro Noble from Yale University. In her current role as Associate Director of the Program in Physics, Engineering, and Biology, and of the Integrated Graduate Program in Physical and Engineering Biology, Doro develops, implements, and manages a variety of interdisciplinary research programs and initiatives. She has considerable experience in mentoring undergraduate and graduate students, writing and managing grants to support interdisciplinary training initiatives, student recruiting, organizing research, teaching and career-related events, and leading science outreach efforts. She especially loves working with students. Doro has a BA in biochemistry from the College of Worcester and a PhD in molecular biophysics and biochemistry from Yale University.
Hi, everyone. I'm Doro Noble, and I'm really excited to share with you how we at Yale have grown equity, inclusion, and diversity in PoLS and in STEM. So one of the ways has been through our NSF research experiences for undergraduates, or RAU site, that Corey O'Hearn and I co-lead. And the goals of this program are to bring to Yale undergraduates with limited access to research, but who are very interested in research, to be able to conduct 10 weeks of summer research at Yale. And we, of course, work with them to improve their professional development skills, such as presenting, And this is a great way to increase diversity in STEM. Since 2009, we have had close to 120 participants, and roughly half of them were underrepresented in STEM. And Yale PoLS faculty have really done a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of mentoring these students, who, as far as I know, have gone on to STEM jobs and STEM careers, all of them, with roughly 2/3 having gotten their PhD or MD PhD. And so how do we do this? How do we have a successful REU site? Well, one thing that's important is to have a strong recruiting plan in place so that students are aware of our program and how to apply for it. So the two conferences, SACNAS and Abercrams, are a great place to recruit. We also have a strong mentoring plan in place. So we have mentorship that lasts beyond the end of the program. And we also offer training on inclusive mentoring for all of our mentors. Individual research projects are important for our students so that they can have project ownership. And we have a robust evaluation component so that we know what we're doing well and where there are areas for improvement. And if you're not familiar with the Student Assessment of Learning Gains instrument, I encourage you to check it out here. It's a really great resource. And finally, we have a lot of professional development workshops and activities for our students. They especially love the career series and being involved in science outreach to be able to give back and really inspire the next generation. So I want to make sure to remind you that if you have an active NSF award, you can apply for an REU supplement. You don't need an NSF REU site for that. And supplements are a great way to diversify in STEM. Finally, for science outreach, we work frequently with New Haven public school students. One platform that has worked really well has been to give short talks, followed each by a very engaging hands-on activity. And students have really liked this way of learning about research. And sometimes some of these activities have turned into standalone modules that comprise part of the Pathfinder summer program curriculum. And this is a program that prepares inner city students to succeed in college preparatory high schools. And some of the modules we have developed have been the physics of collision, biological properties or physical properties of biological polymers, and constructing and controlling circuits where, in addition to an introduction to electronics, they're introduced to programming. And all of these modules are available on our website here. So I look forward to leveraging the strengths of the PoLS network to grow PoLS in STEM and disseminate and share our resources. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dora. Next, we have Keith Harmon. Keith Harmon is a director of the Meyerhoff Scholars Program at UMBC, which Science Magazine has called the gold standard for how to diversify the U.S. academic research community. To date, more than 500 Meyerhoff scholars have earned PhD, MD, or joint MD-PhD degrees, and UMBC leads the nation in African American undergraduates who go on to earn MD-PhDs. Harmon has worked to support students in higher education for 21 years, including through the Meyerhoff program and maximizing access to research careers MARC program. He focuses on refining and advancing best practices for undergraduate STEM success and implementing effective approaches with partner institutions across the nation. Harmon is originally from Georgia. He earned a Bachelor's of Music and Piano Performance from Jacksonville University and a Master's of Music and Piano Performance from the Jacobs School of Music at Indiana University, Bloomington. He is currently pursuing a doctorate in language, literacy, and culture at UMBC.
Good afternoon, I'm Keith Harmon, and I'm here to share with you a bit more about the Meyerhoff Scholars Program. I'm working on sharing my screen, and I don't know that that's happening just yet. I think I have one more click to make that happen. I think we're there. Awesome, there we go. So pleasure to be with you today. I'm here to share a bit more about the Meyerhoff program, a high-level overview. Our program was began by our president, Freeman Rabowski, who was then in another position at the institution, but had attended Hampton University, a historically Black college and university, and had this idea of strong self-worth, and had a chance meeting with the Baltimore area philanthropist, Robert Meyerhoff. And they began what is now a 32-year experiment in diversifying STEM. And so our program began in '88. First group of students came in '89. They were African-American men from the state of Maryland. Women joined the program in 1990. And in '96, the program was open to all high-achieving students across the nation, regardless of race or ethnicity. Looking to design the program, Freeman looked to the literature, and what did the literature say about the challenges underrepresented minorities were having in college and universities across the nation? So, of course, low expectations, cultural isolation, not having a group of peers, looking at the advising the students were getting in STEM, practical applications to the coursework and experiential learning. And so the program was designed looking at what were many of the challenges students were experiencing. So again, we're here to help students, predominantly underrepresented minorities, but all prepare for terminal degrees in STEM, PhD, or the combined MD PhD. And that's around advising, social and moral support, and other kinds of enrichment experiences. I'll park here. I think if there's a big takeaway from my flash talk, it's really this slide, because these are the components, these are the mechanisms by which we think the largest change happens. And our program is founded upon this idea of high expectations, that if you're a 4.0 student, a 3.0 student, or a 2.5 student, or a 2.0 student, we communicate that we believe you can do your best. We want you to do your best, be your best, and we have high expectations for students. But we don't simply stop there. A lot of it is really about high levels of support. It's one thing to expect and leave it there. It's another thing to have high expectations and then to support and resource students in a very high way. And that's also what we do. I believe also our evaluators tell us that, and our alumni also tell us that their defining experience as a Meyerhoff Scholar is the 6-week pre-freshman bridge program. And that gets a lot of attention. And so for 6 weeks, they're with us. We're helping them understand the expectations of STEM, of the Academy, of Meyerhoff, helping them understand they're not coming to the 13th grade, but to a new challenging academic environment, and helping develop the sense of community, this cohort model, which is also very strong. A little bit about some indicators of success. 99% of Meyerhoff freshmen will continue in a STEM major beyond their freshman year. 95% of folks who come to us, come through our bridge program, will leave UMBC with the STEM degree. Average GPA for all of our students, about 250. In the spring semester was a 3.55. We have Goldwater Scholars, Phi Beta Kappa folks, Tau Beta Pi inductees, UMBC valedictorians, and some other data there. And our evaluators do tell us that African-American Meyerhoffs are 5.3 times more likely to enroll in graduate study than African-Americans who declined our offer and went to other universities. This was mentioned in my intro, but I'll just cover it really quickly. We are the #1 predominantly white institution in the nation sending African-Americans on who graduate and complete PhDs in STEM. Howard is the #1 institution overall, historically Black college and university. But then again, you'll see UMBC is #2. And you'll see again, right below them are, again, leading the pack are another group of historically Black colleges and universities. And I think we need to get to #9, actually 10, with University of Florida is the next predominantly white institution who's leading, and then back to Morehouse and College Park and others. With the MD PhD, we are the #1 institution across the nation who sends Black students on who complete the combined MD PhD by a factor that's quite high. And again, we can talk about why that is. I think it really has a lot to do with students' exposure to research very on. And I think it also has a lot to do with helping them understand the pathway very early on and be prepared for it. I say that because I say this. Here's a young woman who's a Black MD PhD who did not know what this was when she started college, right? And so it always just, it sings back to me that there is so much potential, that there are students who have the ability, who have the capability, and do not know that these pathways exist if we don't help them get that information and help to expose them to it. And again, 7 years after this experience, she's talking about what she learned at my Meyerhoff family, who told me what an MD PhD was. And again, I'll harken back to our summer bridge program. This is another young man, Jamal, who finished at Hopkins Computer Engineering, who, again, another Facebook post at the end of a PhD, just struck me that they both went back to their summer experience on those days of finishing those PhDs, and reflected on the impact of those experiences in giving them direction and focus even 5 to 7, 8 years beyond UMBC. Okay. And again, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. We really talk a lot about inclusive excellence at UMBC. Our president loves this quote that excellence is never an accident. The work that we're doing at institutions has to be intentional. It has to have effort. It has to have intelligent execution. And I love and appreciate being a part of this meeting today, because these conversations are what brings that work to the forefront of the institutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our last speaker in this session is Margie Dieter, who I think everybody knows now. But Dr. Dieter has been the program manager for the Physics of Living Systems Student Research Network since the spring of 2016. While no longer involved in research, her past studies focused on extracellular matrix and its role in cell differentiation. She graduated from Rice University with a double major in English and biology and received her PhD from the UT Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences in the Genes and Development program.
Good afternoon, and thanks to all of you for participating in this workshop, and thanks also to Margaret for the invitation to speak. I'm Margie Dieter. I'm the program manager for PoLS. Most of what I do is behind the scenes, but basically I work with faculty to figure out how PoLS can best serve the students, the graduate students in our network. Just as a bit of background, PoLS was formed back in 2009 as a way for biophysics graduate students without a background in biology to connect with each other, share their experiences so they feel less alone in their pursuits, and support each other as they learn biological vocabulary and methods. Students attend annual meetings together and talk with each other during poster sessions or in between talks, and also meet during APS or biophysics dinners, summer school programs, and other PoLS events. The part of my job that is really fun is talking with students about their research or something else that they find interesting. I also really enjoy seeing students from different schools talking with each other at our get-togethers. And the very best part is when these students realize that they have some knowledge that can help each other and they initiate a collaboration. Most of the collaborations that come about in our program aren't faculty driven, they come from the students, and that's really what we want from the program. When the network was formed, the focus was on getting the program up and running. Who are the participating nodes? Where are the meetings being held? How do we hold workshops and summer programs? Leaving diversity to be managed in an informal way. Currently, some of the PoLS nodes have programs in place to support underrepresented students. Some work with high school students and teachers, and some have other ways to help. I think we all realize that we could do more, and I'm excited that both faculty and students feel strongly about increasing diversity in this program and in STEM. Our goal is to make some specific structured changes in the program that will be effective in increasing diversity. This meeting is a step on that path. Trying to tackle this issue might feel a little like trying to eat an elephant. There is so much to do, and the problem can feel overwhelming. If we can just start taking bites, that's the only way we're going to eat that elephant. I encourage us all to think about how we'll start, what changes we can make now, and remember that we already have one support system in place, our Student Research Network. Our network is designed to support students. In your own nodes, minority students can connect with students at seminars, journal clubs, lunch and learns, any of your activities. If your student needs to learn a technique, they can go visit another PoLS lab and learn from the people who do it every day. That will also build connections and help them feel supported. we can make changes, and we can use the strength of the iPulse network to do that. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So now I'd like to open it up for discussion. We have 25 minutes. We have until 2:25. So yeah, I'd like to encourage you all to ask questions and talk about the flash talks that we've just watched.
Let me make just one comment here. I think it's a good place to start. It's going to end up with the final discussion. But one thing, like Creston said when you opened the meeting, is that we want to come with some actionable items that the PoLS network can do. So if people can put that on their discussion base, what we should be doing, where should we put the resources we have? There's a lot of questions. If we get more resources, what can we do? The question is, I want to put an easier question. What can we do with the resource we have? And then if that works, we can ask for more resource. So people can put a little bit more a plan of action together with the discussion. I would appreciate that. That's what we want to try to achieve by the end and actually get something by integrating the nodes. You just heard what Margie said. That's where we want to go in that direction. And we don't want these things to be a top-down approach. So we really would like to hear from the young people what they want, what they think will work. Thank you.
Great, that's a good idea. We have a question in the chat from Dr. Levine. This question is to Dr. Harmon. Have other schools tried to clone the successful UMBC approach?
Yeah, that's a great question. Happy to share. So a number of schools have done bits and pieces over the years, but never sort of the full complement of programming, and also followed sort of our model and ethics or approach to advising and working with students. But more recently, yes, Chapel Hill has the Chancellor Science Scholars Program. Penn State has the Millennium Science Scholars Program. Those replication efforts were funded by HHMI. We're now working with 2 schools on the West Coast funded by CZI, the Chan Zuckerberg Institute Initiative. At Berkeley, there's the SEED Scholars Programs. And at UCSD, there's the PATH, PATHS Biology Science Scholars Programs. And so Chapel Hill and UNC have graduated cohorts. They're being very successful. Berkeley is in their first year this fall. And I have an article that we published in Science that gives you some information about those replication efforts and also some data. And I'll put that in the chat right now.
Not everyone has Freeman Hrabowski as the president, so
right,
this is a bit of a problem.
Well, and that's exactly one of the reasons the replication efforts were funded, because many folks said, well, how can you do this without a Freeman? How can you do this if you don't have a Black president, right? And so,
no, it's not the Black president. His charisma is just off scale. So
no, I hear you and I understand. And so a part of it is, right, getting your senior leadership to buy in, because there is significant commitment needed to make these programs happen. And really what's at the base here is it's about institutional and cultural change, which takes a long time to do, right? But it's getting people on board to understand it's the right thing to do. Had more time, I'd share something with you. There's a wonderful slide we have about how Meyerhoff had changed the culture of UMBC by increasing scholar programs across disciplines, how people across disciplines interact, support, engage, teach, support students. And so I think that's the power of the Meyerhoff model, is that it is replicable and it can be adapted to different disciplines and really impact how campuses think about supporting their students.
Great. Joshua Shavitz has his hand up.
So I had another question for Dr. Harmon. I love the Meyerhoff program. We have an awesome graduate student who came from you guys here at Princeton, and he is in my group and he's totally fantastic. I think, it's wonderful to think that we could all work with our administrations to make large initiatives like what you guys have. And I'm all for trying that. Success probability is stochastic perhaps, but in terms of the PFCs and the iPoLS nodes, we're sort of little groups of enthusiastic, like-minded people. And so I guess, are there take-home messages that I can boil down from your guys' experience that we might be able to implement like on a micro scale, the kinds of things that we actually have kind of direct influence and control over?
I'd say I think many of you are on the right track and are doing it, I'm sure. Based on what I heard in the flash talks, you know, a big part of what we do in our program is we help students contextualize failure, right? Scientists fail quite regularly. And from the very beginning, we're helping students realize and have comfort with failure as opposed to I didn't do well, I'm out of this major, I'm looking for something else. And so a lot of the things you're doing, working with students in small groups, helping them understand that, demystifying the pathway, demystifying all of these things about STEM, the things that we never tell students. And I get a sense from what I'm hearing that many of your programs on small group level are doing that and connecting people. I love this idea someone said about the iPoLS, that, you know, you can send someone to another group to learn a technique or learn something that's not available in their lab. And it's connecting people across communities, across silos, and helping them leverage knowledge. And I think the more you do that, the more you empower students to do that broadly. So I think from what I'm hearing, the group is on it. And it's embedded in many of the things that I hear you saying and doing. But those are some. I mean, I think those are sort of our takeaways. It's demystification, contextualizing failure and success, and helping people understand the pathway and help them construct a scientific identity for themselves through their experiences. That's really that's at the heart of what we do.
I was wondering if I could ask the other PoLS nodes folks, did y'all have challenges in starting your programs? Or are there things that you have learned that you would pass along to other people who might be interested in starting?
If I can add something to discussion, and probably Keith can also comment on it. I think we have our ideas, and I think some of them work. You heard from the people from the Houston Community College, you heard from the University of Houston, you heard all that. But recruiting is always a challenge. How we inspire people from a community that's not used to being to the science and show that's a path to success. You know what I mean? In a sense, that's not something that's on the environment they grow up. They haven't been exposed to that. So one of the difficulties we had, for example, even recruiting, is that basically some of our underrepresented students, we see that many cases, they don't even know they can be financially supported to work on science. You know what I mean? So can you give a little, and we are trying to work on it, but I always feel like an eternal amateur doing that. So can you give a little bit more professional guidance to us on how do we actually inspire these people? We put our efforts there, but is there some particular tips that you would like to give to us?
I think it's being transparent. I think it's all about relationship building. And you make a great point. I think it's a part of that demystification, right? When I encounter a student and we're recruiting, I feel like instead of hooking them from Meyerhoff, my job is to help demystify science and STEM and to make them comfortable with the idea of a STEM major so that Meyerhoff becomes an attractive proposition for them. And it's helping them understand, right, a pathway in your career. And do you understand how much support in terms of programming and financial support? It's working with high school partners. It's getting information out to parents. But I will tell you, many of the schools who come to UMBC to recruit students come consistently, develop relationships with our students, and that makes a difference. You know, for a number of years, we sent a number of folks to Doro's program at Yale, and it was about relationship, right? And people from Yale coming to visit and students getting to know them and becoming comfortable, and the word spreading. So I think we have to do that same thing with high school partners, NSBE junior chapters, if there are other kinds of programs that are funded, you know, by NSF that we could touch and get information out to. Students are great at this, of course, right? And so getting, it could be something to look at. How could you utilize and garner some support and energy from your iPoLS students?
So that's a great answer. Let me give you a follow-up on that question. When we were trying to build these relationships, Margaret talked a little bit about that. with, for example, University of Houston and the Houston Community Colleges, and now you're starting our interactions with Texas Southern University. We felt sometimes before we would send our faculty to talk and recruit, but we felt right now that sending our postdocs and students, the young people, to talk to students first, as being the front of the center and the front of PoLS is more effective. So when you tell about building relationships, how do you see this relationship about sending the senior people versus sending your young people? They can communicate most. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. I think it's not an either or. I like the combination. A lot of folks, when they come to recruit, will bring graduate students, postdocs. But faculty also have a different perspective. And at the end of the day, students also need to become comfortable seeing faculty show up in those spaces and doing this work, right? And I think we also can't, and I don't think you're saying this, but it's also not the responsibility of these other folks in training to do this work. And so I think we also need to make sure faculty are being included and work with colleagues on campus in terms of language and approach, diversity professionals and other folks on campus. But I think you're on the right path there. But I would also say include the faculty in those. Definitely do take the folks in training though, yes.
I think the one thing that we might that I might add to this is that I think Joshua was asking if we had things to recommend, challenges that we've overcome. I still feel like we have a lot of challenges that we're trying to overcome, but one of them is that I think has worked in a couple of cases is providing a standard sort of formalized process to then apply for the program. And I don't mean that in place of the relationship building. I think that's really important, but having a clear process about which to go through, especially for getting involved in undergraduate research, because so much of that right now, it's sort of like hiring postdocs. There's not oftentimes not formal even ads or times that people can go out to apply. So like with the VIP program, having a very standardized process through which anybody can apply, and where there's a single point of contact on a website for that process. That doesn't replace getting the word out, building those relationships, recruiting people to apply for that. But I think it makes it a little more standardized than to go ahead and go through that process. I don't know if anyone else has had that experience or maybe a counterpoint to it. But I've certainly found that if we're just relying on the people who, even if they get the exposure at one point in time and then have to themselves follow up individually and sort of figure out the path to then get in, that creates some barriers that seem to be problematic at times.
I can add a comment to that. One thing that Margaret did that was beautiful and really improved our program big time is not to scare underrepresented students by saying, we are going to check you on your GPA and all the hard classes you took. And we completely change our admission program based on, why don't you work hard on a personal statement? Convince us that you can do something. We are not going to look at your grades, just want to see where you're coming from. Well, that was a real improvement for our program. And we have some fantastic students that now did great science with us. Now they're in graduate school. Some of us stay in graduate school with us that we never would know in advance if it was not Margaret's way of changing the completely way of recruiting. And I think that's one thing I learned about how much sometimes we scare people in advance, but just by the process, like you said, right? Basically, how do you present yourself? So giving people an opportunity to present themselves, that for me was a learning experience for me. I just observed from outside, but I really learned a lot from it.
So Jose, when these students who had a great experience through this Margaret's vision, so to speak, when they apply to your school for graduate school, you don't look at their GRE is not required, GPA is not. What do you do at that stage? You go personally tell the admission guy, look, admit person X.
That's what I do in my department. I do on the SSPP program. I think that basically I had several cases where I said I personally guarantee that basically if nobody else on the faculty wants this kid, I want it. I just want to give this kid more opportunity. If he or she comes to Rice, they should have a choice to choose who to work for. But I'll personally guarantee that I have a position for that person. Doesn't mean I'll be the only one getting that people. And I think people are starting to up on the idea that basically we had someone that performed well in our program. That's already proof that the person, first of all, can can do great on that program. And I think one thing we are learning more and more, and basically these days, is that all these conventional ways of selecting people don't work. Like, for example, success of graduate students in physics and GPA in physics have zero correlation, right? So in a sense is, I think, but what Margaret does is that takes a lot of work when you do these things, because, you know, checking a few numbers and drawing a line is much easier than actually reading statements or doing interview with people and really trying to figure out what's going on. It takes a lot of more energy. So one thing we're trying to work is how do we deal with that course load? Margie can tell you, she's also involved in some of these interviews. It's a lot of personal relationship building in terms of doing that assessment and figure out the people that want to come. And the more I heard on this meeting, basically, you saw the initial statement by Philip Phillips on the situation. Exactly, a lot of these great people that came out from assessment that are non-conventional.
Yeah, I mean, that's something Dr. Limbard emphasized this morning as well.
Okay, I'm going to say time out because we guys we can talk about this more during the CTPP section later on.
Sure.
Can we have another hand up from Caitlin Knapp?
Hi, yes. So this question is pretty much to all of the Flash Talk presenters. The focus has been on the outreach that we can do in terms of mentoring and bridge programs and reaching into high schools, but I wonder if you can speak to any kind of work that you had to do in-house before these programs became successful, any kind of preparatory changes or things that you had to implement in order to create that welcoming space for the students you're reaching out to be brought into.
Someone want to comment on it? That's a good question.
I think I could comment on.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I've already spoken once, so please go ahead.
So I wanted to say that I think the biggest point that was brought up in some talks earlier also is for the students that are coming in either for short-term workshops and camps or for longer-term, summer camps. A lot of it is about getting a personal relationship with the labs they're working in, with the students they're working with. And so in terms of, for example, in the GradMap program at Maryland, it's the graduate students who are the key. And so there is a peer mentoring. Graduate students are working one-on-one with the undergraduate students that are coming in from other institutions and really establishing that point of contact and that mentoring relationship with support from faculty. So I think it needs some adjustment in terms of how people want to open up their spaces and make the students comfortable. And the same with some of the summer scholars. You want to make sure that there are faculty who will create that space, provide the opportunity and time for other students in their group to act as mentors. So I would say that's among the most important things for success.
For us, for the program that's for mostly middle school students, we've had to work with our graduate students to make sure that what they're presenting is accessible to that age group. And so it's actually great because it doubles up as a training, communications training activity for the grad students. And this way, we know that we do practices and we know that what we're doing is quality, because I think one of the worst things you can do is maybe get a middle school students who's coming to one of these outreach events for the first time and have it be not a great experience. And we're very fortunate because at Yale, we actually have a whole office that's dedicated to working with New Haven area public schools. And that's really great because they can help us arrange to get the right group of students. If we want, say, 20 students from 6th and 7th grade, they can help us do that. They have a program where they essentially, any student identified by the public school teachers can enter this program and then have a lot of different outreach activities within Yale accessible to them. And this has really made our jobs easier because we essentially didn't have to go through the really hard process of, creating specific relationships with the middle school teachers, say, to attract students. That part was already done for us. And so we could really, really just focus on the quality science outreach that we could do. And so that's been really helpful. Another thing for the RAU site has been just having a pilot program and having some institutional support to start that.
What I was going
Go ahead.
What I was going to add was that I think the sort of obvious thing is that you want to have that when people come to the community for the first time, that they feel a sense of belonging and identification with it. And that creates this chicken and an egg problem, right? Without more representation and diversity in the present community, it's difficult to recruit into that. But that means that what we have to do, I think, is, and what I've been taking home from as a take-home message from these discussions we've been having, is that we really need to push both on the belongingness and on the recruitment side in parallel so that they synergize. And I think you can do that in some ways with the REU program. Jennifer made sure that she recruited such that there was never any one group that was in the majority in that cohort of students that was coming in. So that there was always a diversity of representation in that group. So there was some management of that. I think the place where it's been most successful has been in our recruitment of women to the program. Again, this is not something that I had direct involvement with, but our women in physics community made sure that it got together with our admissions committee and made sure that for a couple of years that we when we invited students to campus to interview for admissions to graduate school, they made sure they invited an equal number of men and women. So we usually had more men that were admitted than women, but they only invited to campus an equal representation of that. So when they showed up, it was more represented that way. So there's some ways to sort of, I think, try and create these sort of clusters of better represented groups that then you can try and leverage in that way. But we're still struggling with it a lot in the VIP program. This is something that I'm really trying to work on, and it's been very difficult.
Thanks. We have another hand up, Landry Harambe.
Hi. I guess I have a question about, I guess, what do these programs see as more important? Essentially, like having an opportunity to develop skills and achieve some sort of a research final product and present at a conference, or do the entire sort of research life cycle, and therefore develop a STEM identity, or to have a sort of a more inclusive community in that experience. Essentially, have a more positive experience. Because in my experience, I found the opportunity to gain programming skills, do some research, and eventually be able to present it to have been the most motivating and effective way to have me develop a STEM identity versus since I'm at the University of Maryland, which is a predominantly white institution, I still think that in those situations, those can be competing values that I'd just like to know what you guys think about that.
I think in our case, it was maybe a combination. I mean, all of our students have certainly really enjoyed having something to show, and even walking away with some poster. It doesn't really matter how great or how much they accomplished, but just something that they had done in lab that they can share, that gives them project ownership that they feel proud of. At the same time, I think it is important for them to have a cohort. And so I guess I presented in my flash talk the REU supplement possibility. And my only, I guess, words of warning with that would be just make sure you would have a cohort if you were to accept only one student, because that is really important. And along some of the things that we had discussed prior, we actually have talked with our REU students about the types of mentors that you could have and how, you know, it's a great thing to not just have 1 or 2 mentors, but maybe have 5 mentors, and they can offer different things. And maybe some of them might look like you, but maybe some of them don't look like you. And it doesn't mean that they don't care about your success. They might care just as much. That's why they're here, and it's okay. And I was sort of surprised, but it seemed like a lot of students really resonated with that and really hadn't thought about, you know, who to get as mentors, and that, you know, if they were African American or Hispanic and they had a white mentor, that person would necessarily really care about their success. And so just even having a kind of welcome conversation about this, you know, not to start off the program, but later on once everybody knows everybody else, that was surprisingly, that went over really well, I guess.
Landry, I can add to that for the Georgia Tech RAU program. Jennifer Curtis here. It's interesting. I mean, I think the reality is every student has different needs, right? And so we try to meet them where their needs are. Some people are ready to go and it's all about the research, and identity issues or belonging is nothing that matters to them. And so then they're presented with a robust research project to pursue. In fact, everybody is. And then there's others who actually really need some work to sort of feel like they belong, some work to have them sort of figure out how the system works and what the flow is for research. And it's more important to sort of have them leave with the idea that this is something that they should be part of, that they can be part of, where they belong. And so it's just a question of where the needs are. But I would say I don't think the two things need to be at odds. Everyone comes in and is matched with a good research project. The key then is to not put too much pressure on the students, because they put so much pressure on themselves to have amazing outcomes by the end of the summer. And as we all know, some research goes well, some research doesn't go well. And so to support them and have them see this is part of the research cycle, you can fail or you can succeed. But to mix that experience, the research skills and so forth, with then the other messages that come with you belong here, this is how this works, you can do this, I think is critical. So they don't have to be working against each other.
Awesome.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you. Yeah, we are at time right now, so we're going to have a 9-minute break before the next session starts at 2:35. I want to encourage you all to continue the discussion in the Slack. And I think there are a few questions that are in the chat still, directed at different panelists. So if you want to check that out, that would be good. But yeah, thanks for listening and participating.
And thanks, Mary Lou, for being our moderator. So we'll be back in 10 minutes. You can go grab a cup of coffee or stretch before we have our next panel.
Thanks. Good job, Mary Lou.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right. I have 2:36 Eastern time on my phone. So I think we should go ahead and get ready with the next panel. Is Diane here?
Hi.
Diana, there you are. All right. So our next session is presentations from the Physics Frontiers Centers. And I will let Diana get us going.
Hi, everyone. Our first speaker for today is Dr. Charlene Dennis. She's the Associate Director of Education and Inclusivity at the Center for the Physics of Living Cells at UIUC. Dr. Dennis received her BS in Biochemistry and Molecular Biology from the University of California, Santa Cruz in 2001, and then worked at Genentech Inc. in South San Francisco for 3 years before coming to the University of Illinois to pursue a PhD in biophysics and computational biology. For her PhD research, Charlene used spectroscopic methods to investigate protein stability and dynamics in cell membranes and developed a protein-based system to approximate macromolecular crowding in vitro. Dr. Dennis was also an NSF JK-12 Fellow, where she worked with K-12 teachers across Illinois to develop inquiry-based science curricula and improve her own teaching skills. After her PhD, Dr. Dennis has worked to develop programs and initiatives that serve to support diverse students and young scientists in STEM at all stages of the pipeline. Among these include a middle school science and social justice curriculum to investigate the Flint water crisis, a Spanish language family science program in partnership with SACNAS graduate students, a summer research program for underrepresented high school students in physics and engineering, and more recently, a bridge program in partnership with Fisk University. Dr. Dennis has taught at both the University of Illinois Laboratory High School and in the departments of physics and mechanical science and engineering. She returned full-time to work for the CPLC in 2008, where she currently serves as the Associate Director for Education and Inclusivity.
Hello, my name is Charlene Denaz. I am the Associate Director of Education and Inclusivity at the Center for the Physics of Living Cells at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Today I'm going to be talking to you about our diversity, equity, and inclusion programming. The organizing theme behind all of our programming is as follows. We work to support diverse scientists at every stage of the pipeline, with particular attention paid to transitions along the pipeline. We not only work to recruit diverse scientists into our programming, but also to retain those scientists, to provide them with the training, the professional development that they need in order to be placed in their chosen field, career field. All of our programs are evaluated and assessed, and that data is used to constantly improve upon our programs. So we have programs at every stage of the pipeline, from elementary school all the way up to junior faculty and scientists. A couple of programs I'd like to highlight are Physics of Life experience for teachers. This brings high school teachers and some lower level teachers into our labs to experience biological physics research and develop innovative curricula for their students. We work with Fisk University, a historically Black college in Nashville, Tennessee, to train their undergraduate students in our CPLC labs and to prepare them for the PhD program here in physics. We have developed Physics of Living Systems education meetings to highlight best practices in teaching in this interdisciplinary field, in science communication, and next year we will work with our Fisk colleagues to highlight best practices in supporting Black scientists in the field. Finally, our signature outreach program is our CPLC Summer School that attracts scientists, graduate students, postdocs from all over the country and the world to come here to learn how to integrate experiment and theory to solve the most important biological physics problems. Again, we have programs that not only work to recruit, but also to train and to place diverse cohorts of students and postdocs. We have an excellent track record with placing the next generation of researchers, particularly in tenure track academic fields, with a 37% placement rate compared to 8% nationally. And this is a very diverse cohort of students and postdocs that we are placing. We also place students in a wide variety of other sectors, including industry and in government. Finally, all of our programs are constantly being assessed, and we usually use that data to constantly improve upon our programming. One data point that we are always looking at with regard to our CPLC Summer School is not only the number of applicants, but also where those applicants are coming from, the universities, the geographical spread, and we are always looking to see whether we are broadening our reach with each consecutive year. We also look at student surveys and student evaluations to see where we may have fallen short in one particular year in order to course correct, and also to build upon our strengths to consistently improve our programming throughout the year. To summarize, the CPLC Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion programs work to support diverse scientists across the entire STEM workforce pipeline. We follow students all the way from recruiting them to placement in their chosen career field. And we are constantly collecting data on our programs and using that data to improve our programming. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you for the short video. And now our second speaker is Professor Jose Anuchik. Professor Anuchik is the Harry C. and Olga K. Wise Professor of Physics and Astronomy and Professor of Chemistry and Biosciences at Rice University, and CPRIT Scholar in Cancer Research. This is the Cancer Prevention and Research Institute of Texas. He's also the co-director of the Center for Theoretical Biological Physics, CTBP, NSF Center that encompasses a broad spectrum of research and training activities at the forefront of the biology-physics interface. He studied at the University of Sao Paulo and the California Institute of Technology, earning his doctorate in 1987. His doctoral supervisor at Caltech was John Hopfield. After postdoctoral studies in Santa Barbara, California, and a brief faculty position returning to the University of Sao Paulo, he moved to the University of California, San Diego in 1990 and joined Rice University in 2011. His major scientific achievements include the theory of tunneling pathways to understand electron transfer in proteins and the creation of the funnel concept that creates a new theoretical framework for protein folding. His research also focuses on genetic networks and modeling the 3D structure of the genome. He received much recognition for his scientific achievements, including the election to the American National Academy of Science in 2006.
I want to talk today about our training program at the Center for Theoretical Biological Physics, CTBP, particularly on the impact that we have on underrepresented groups. I want to say CTBP is a great place for this area because our students and postdocs interact with each other in the same way. And that includes the underrepresented groups, the undergrads together. So this horizontal learning, when you have not only the faculty interact with the students and postdocs, but the postdocs and the students interact with themselves, allowed for a great training for that. As you can see, we are a very diverse community. This is just a list of our postdocs that are now professors everywhere. And to show here, the reason I'm showing this photo very fast is just so you can have a view of the diversity of the people we train. I think these photos speaks for themselves. But I don't want to talk about postdocs and graduate students. I really want to focus on training undergrads. We have a program called Orbiters. And the Orbiters has two parts. One that's for general training of undergrads, but the most interesting part has to do with our Frontiers in Science program, where we focus on undergrad students coming from underrepresented communities. So for example, we partner with universities like University of Houston, that's a Hispanic serving institution. Same thing for the Houston Community College, and with the Texas TSU, who is a historical Black college. These are paid internships, and we recruit these students that have no idea what they can do in science, and they come to train with us. Let me give you a little bit more of a feeling for this program. As you can see, as I already told you, these students coming from all these different institutions like UH Clear Lake, that are Hispanic serving institution, Houston Community College that has all different kinds of minorities, the Texas Southern University, a historic Black college university. These are paid internships. And the best thing is every one of our trainees that come from these communities, they have individualized training. That means they have one graduate student or one postdoc that's specially assigned for them. Many of them do this 10 weeks of research during the summer, and then after that they stay with us. We have a retention program. And now this program is being developed in parallel at our new site in Boston at Northeastern University. I want to point out a little bit about this program during the last 5 years. We have a large diverse group. Here's the class of this year, as you can see around here. We had 53 students in total, 16 were women, 22 Hispanic, 5 were African American. I want to comment that basically many scientific articles came from that. These students now, they have been admitted to great graduate school or industrial job, and we have a full data available of that if you want to have a look. But the point it is, our kids where this thing has been transformative on their lives. They didn't even know about the possibility of doing research, the idea that research can be paid, and they come to the center. And the best part is we contribute a lot for their lives, but they contribute a lot for the center. They have been great in our success, and we are happy to have them with us. So be glad to talk about more in details during the discussion part. Thank you.
Thank you for that talk. And now our last speaker is Professor Josh Shavitz. I'm sorry, I lost my Word file. Sorry. Josh is actually my advisor at Princeton, and he's the co-director at the Center for the Physics of Biological Function and a professor at Princeton University with appointments in the physics department and at the Louis Sigler Institute for Integrative Genomics. He leads research focused on understanding how life emerges from collections of molecules, cells, and organisms, asking how bacterial cells grow, divide, and move, how collections of cells form patterns, and how and why discrete animal behaviors are generated by the brain. Josh completed his bachelor's degree in physics at Columbia University, where he was an II scholar. He received his PhD from Stanford University, where he studied the molecular modus kinesin and RNA polymerase using optical tweezers in the group of Stephen Bloch. He then moved to the University of California, Berkeley as a Miller Fellow, where he focused on the motility of bacteria, including the actin propelled Rickettsia, Myxococcus and the wall-less spiroplasma. Josh has been part of the faculty at Princeton since 2007.
Hello, my name is Josh Shavitz. I'm a professor of physics in the Louis Sigler Institute for Integrative Genomics at Princeton University. I'm also one of the co-directors of our NSF Physics Frontier Center for the Physics of Biological Function. Our center, which we call the CPBF, is a joint partnership between Princeton University and the City University of New York. Like many PFCs, we do lots of different activities, some focused on research, some focused on education and outreach. Our center doesn't administer our own graduate or undergraduate programs, and so we're able to use our resources and our sort of efforts to supplement existing programs on our campuses and more broadly to enhance diversity through our branch of physical science. And we do that focusing three sort of different levels: undergraduate, graduate, and postdoc sorts of opportunities. And I'll take you briefly through each one of those now. So at the undergraduate level, we teach a summer school we've been doing for several years now called the Physics of Life Summer School, geared towards undergraduate physics majors. About half of the students in this program come from the greater CUNY system in New York, which is an extremely large and diverse system all throughout New York City and the boroughs of New York City. Of course, last year we had to go online due to the COVID pandemic. This actually allowed us to reach a much broader set of students. We had about 1,000 students who took our course, which lasted several months throughout the summer. And this really, the representation was worldwide, countries throughout our planet, and it was a really wonderful opportunity to reach students we probably wouldn't have ever reached before. On the graduate student level, our center runs several day-long symposia, roughly monthly during the school year. This allows us to focus on specific topics in depth. We host a variety of students who come and visit when we're not in COVID times from the Northeast and all the pole nodes. And this year, what we've done is we've started tutorial sessions for those students who like a little bit of background ramp up before the symposium. And this has been very successful in getting a broader group of students than we've had in the past. About 40% of the students taking the tutorials are URMs. The majority of them come from public institutions. And so we think it's been a really wonderful success. At the postdoc level, we have two fellows programs we're involved in. We have our own fellows, which we can use as a way of increasing the diversity in all the departments that are part of the center. And we have a newly established program called the Faculty Fellows in the Physical Sciences at Princeton, which is a partnership between our Biophysics Center, the Physics Department, the Astrophysics Department, and Geosciences. And the goal is to bring in sort of critical mass, a cohort of new postdoctoral fellows who will both increase the kinds of diverse representations we have in all these programs, but also work on these issues of equity and inclusion with us to make all of our programs more inclusive and a better place for all of us to be. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for that last video. And now we can proceed to the discussion. I want to remind you that there's three ways of asking questions. You can either raise your hand or just speak out. You can write it in the chat, or if you prefer to be anonymous, you can write it directly to me and I'll read it out loud. And we encourage everyone to participate, especially students.
Yeah, hi, this is Zan Schulten from the University of Illinois. I have a question for Joshua. You said you had this undergrad symposium, Physics of Life. Do the students come and actually stay there in Princeton when they attend this program? And how do you handle that?
Do you mean the summer school?
Yeah, you had the summer school, right, for undergraduates.
So we house them on campus. It's a small group, it's 24 students. For the CUNY students, of course, it's only a train ride away, so the travel funds are not really necessary. We house them and feed them, etc. So it's cost-free to them totally. In addition, some of the students stay, so normally it's a 2-week program, an intensive 2-week lecture-based program with some hands-on units. And then some of the students, the CUNY students, stay on for an REU for the rest of the summer, There they are housed and fed and also make a small stipend. The students who aren't from the CUNY system, we have some travel funds, but usually we ask that if they have a research advisor, if they can get some help from the university, and we've been able to, one way or another, get all the students onto campus, and then it's cost-free from everyone, for everybody from that point on.
Yeah, thank you. Because for our bridge program to undergraduates, we rely very heavily either on the physics department or the College of Engineering. So it's interesting to see how other people can organize this and not necessarily use your own Frontier Center funds to do this.
Yeah. So most of it is paid from our center funds. It's one of the big items in our budget is the summer school program.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And for that summer school, do you have any modules or something of that nature that maybe you could share with the PoLS nodes? Say, it seems like a great thing, and it's a great way to get undergraduates involved in sort of at the interface of physics and biology type research and get some hands-on experience. So I don't think that's something that maybe is the best to have, an online platform that lots of people can join in, but maybe it's something that other nodes could run or add to it and at least use some like core already developed component.
Yeah, so I like that. So this year everything we did on YouTube, but it was very different. So you can go to the CPF YouTube channel. What we did was we ran, there were research presentations. So every week the presenter, who was a faculty, assigned some papers. Before the lecture, there was a discussion section led by students and postdocs of that PI, where they went over some basics and things. And then the PI came later in the afternoon and gave a lecture about some of that material. So that was this year. It was a combination of sort of like lectures about the material and current research topics. Normally what we do, though, it does combine, we have some sort of fundamental lectures, which are, like how solid mechanics might apply, whatever, et cetera, stat mech, things like this. Mm-hmm. We have labs. We have some problem solving kind of precepts. So it almost looks like an intro physics course, but with biology problems they're solving. Mm-hmm. And then one of the things we do are what we call Day of Science. And it's one topic where we have multiple PIs all working on the same thing. And they come in and talk all day long. And it is utterly fantastic. The students love it because you hear theory and experiment and all these people who are all studying, development in the fruit fly or bacterial biofilm formation. And they get all these perspectives. And I think they really get a sense of the depth of some of the biology topics that physicists can approach. And so that's been very nice as part of our summer school.
That's great. And has it been really easy to recruit faculty participants for this?
It's not been too bad.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's pretty good. I mean, it's a really fun program. Like you just have to find 2 weeks where most of the faculty are still in central New Jersey in the summer, which is not super easy, but it's possible. And it's really fun. So we have lunch with the students and dinner with the students. Like usually the people lecturing that day go, many of our graduate students and postdocs like Deanna help in various ways, and then they go to lunch. It's just really a fun time.
Got it. Thank you.
We have a question from the chat from Jules ND. She's a student. They're a student. Dr. Shavitz, how do you recruit those students for the summer school and maybe postdoc too?
You can ask directly, Jules, if you have more to elaborate. Since you
I'm sorry. Yeah, you can ask directly.
I don't know. I can't see everyone. Hello.
Hi. Very good talk. I really like the program. So I was wondering, how do you recruit those students for the summer, for the summer school, and maybe how do you, because you said you have a special program for the postdoc, right? So how does it work? Just curious. I don't want to know.
So recruitment, I think, for a lot of these things is the most difficult part. I think a lot of us are very creative and excited about what we do. And if you put students in front of us, we'll go, everyone on this call will have fun teaching them. So, we have been curating email lists and Twitter lists and things of PIs in schools and undergrad directors at different programs everywhere. In fact, I think this is something that I wanted to ask that the iPoLS network could work on as a whole, is making, really giant mailing lists that we can reach out to people.
Josh, why don't you save that? Basically, I think on the last discussion, we want to come with some actionable items, right? Basically.
Okay, great. So let's make sure we put that on.
That's a good place to summarize all the things and make sure that we move forward on that.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, recruitment is hard. We should work on it because I think that's one of the most interesting problems and where we can make a lot of progress is just exposure and recruiting.
Thank you.
Yeah. We have another student question in the chat from Landry Horenbier. Will REU programs change due to COVID? Does remote mentoring allow for a larger number of students to participate in the program?
I can answer a little bit about our program. The CTB program, since you want to do individual mentoring, it's very hard. So the question for us is really make sure that we have enough graduate students and postdocs. That's always volunteer for the student and postdoc participate, but they all participate in great numbers. So in a sense, that base goes on what Josh just said, how we integrate all these things so we maximize our people and our collaborations based recruiting, who is availability of people to provide training. So for some things, I think we can scale up. That's courses and seminars and things like that. But training still requires someone that follows with the students. And it's a very interesting question because if you bring someone physically to your place, there is a financial cost. And Josh was going to say, basically, that's a big budget, a big item in our budgets. But also there is the fact that you need the personal influence, and for us means limit of students and postdocs, and sometimes that's the limiting factor. So in a sense, we can maximize now the financial costs because we have much less financial costs, but we still have to deal with the fact we want to give the trainees a personal experience, and that requires to have a student or a graduate student or postdoc that works with them.
Yeah, I would say the same is true at Illinois. We were able to run the physics department REU program virtually this year, and then of course with our FISC program, we were able to run that virtually. But really, it's exactly what Jose said. The limiting factor is really finding labs and graduate students who can really be committed to mentoring the students and projects that are appropriate for the students.
But with all that said, I think we have a great participation for young people. We are trying to increase those numbers, and we try to be more reachable. And I think what Josh is saying, how can we use the entire PoLS network together to sort of mix talent and integrating people is something I want to put for the next discussion. So I want to put two plugs for the next discussion. One is, and people can start to think about it, one is actionable items. And I want to do these actual items in two ways. What can we do with our current resources? If we don't get a penny more from anybody else, what can we do with our current resources? And the other one is, what could we do if we had much more funding, but being honest with the money, not wasteful with the money? Remember, that's taxpayer money, so do the best use out of it. So which are great things that I think people would convince us that we should go forward and try to fundraise for it. But in order to fundraise, you have to have a real good story to tell. So put the two things on perspective. And finally, I really want, and I think we're going to start a discussion with that because several of our students have run the lunch tables. I want to see what the students have to propose, what they would like to have compared to what they have now. So what's their ideas? What worked for them? What didn't work for them? What they would like us to do? So let's try to do a little bit coming out from the young people so we don't have just the old people ideas into the process.
I have a question regarding the pandemic as well. Do you feel like you've been able to reach a more diverse pool of people for your REU programs, given that everything is virtual, or has this not changed things?
I mean, our recruiting for our programs, it was all in place before the pandemic really hit. So we had to really pivot our programming. For next summer, they're already sort of encouraging us to plan our programs to be remote. Again, I don't know about the other universities. We're hoping that doesn't happen. But I do know that it was, in some sense, easier on a couple of students who, could stay at home and participate in the program. But I think for other students, it was actually more difficult because they didn't have a place to, really participate in the online modules is really all day. And that's hard to do if you're sort of living at home, you share a bedroom or, whatever the situation was.
I would say that on the recruiting part, that was very hard because one of the things that has worked for us very, very well has been this sort of using our young people as the recruiters. They go to the Houston Community College, they go to the University of Houston, they go to TSU, and they meet with several students, and the students talk to them, and that personal relationship sort of few people, involve people to participate in the program. I think the virtual part sort of cuts that personal interaction, and I think has a negative impact on the program. Actually, I think that in general for our center, there has been a negative impact because the fact we had all these young people all housed in the same place, they're across each other in the corridor, they're talking to each other. I think we missed a lot of that because this sort of informal interactions and learning that's going. So in general, I think that has been one of the major impacts of the pandemics.
Thank you. We have another question from the chat from Srividya Iyer Biswas. Josh and Jose, how would you feel about asking postdocs and graduate students from other institutions if they would participate in virtual mentoring? That could be a win-win solution.
I think, as I said before, that's one direction we want to go. We want to sort of expand over the PoLS network and maybe other institutions that join us to try to maximize this impact. I think that Margie already made some comments about that. We feel that that's the direction to go. I think that we are based our pool of applicants is enormous of good people, and we can see to do that. We are already, because our center has diversified to Northeastern, we already sort of we're increasing our pool of 2 universities, but we feel like that to go. So that's one point I would love to see on the discussion. How can we have sort of synergize all our resources, both in recruiting and training, and get something that's larger than the sum? And I think we can do that.
Yeah,
I think that's a very good idea.
I think it's a very interesting idea. I think logistically it's hard. The larger you make the big group, for example, how do students find the right mentor? So if they come to your department or even the biophysics group in your department, which has 5 faculty, it's trivial, right? Like, what everyone does. University-wide, I don't know, there's 30 people in relevant-ish things. Maybe someone can know what's going on. Even, in the iPoLS network, now you have a student come, right? I mean, and it just gets harder the broader you make it. So, these big programs are possible. I just think they take a lot of resources, and you really need, dedicated paid people, staff, et cetera, who are really cataloging everything, right? Like, the biggest effort I know of is the neuroscientists. I'm sure Simon was probably part of this, ran this gigantic worldwide summer school online this summer. And it was like truly amazing. Like, they got TAs from all over the world and you had to apply, and there was this fantastic thing. But my understanding, it was a huge effort, and some individuals put in, a really large amount of work to make it happen. And so, these things are possible, but the larger you make the umbrella, just the more it costs in every kind of sense of that word. And we need buy-in financially and administratively from a lot of different groups, I think, to make it happen.
But the reverse of what Srividya is saying is possible, right? Supposing she comes along and says, look, there's somebody in West Lafayette who is really good, but I don't have the infrastructure to show him or her how this process works. But either Jose or you or somebody else who have done this multiple times could say, yeah, we could help you out both, maybe financially if possible or otherwise. So that's possible, right? That doesn't take so
That's
much.
already possible, I think. It's, but that, that kind of selects amongst the people who know that we're here, et cetera.
Yeah, that is
much
true.
smaller.
But to put on the discussion, that's what I think it's very important for actionable items. There are lots of things that are already possible informally, but what can we do formalize and actually be effective about it, right? And that's, I think, what I would like to come up with some take-home messages.
So in that
So,
regard,
Jose, I have just a quick comment about some of these programs. Like, we have a lot of our tutorials that are online, or when we teach them are done on the cloud. So that's fine for the theoreticians. And I've even had some people use them and then teach it themselves. But what I'm noticing here is it's harder if this keeps up with us having, not allowing people on site, is how to handle teaching anything to do with the labs and make those how to even do an online tutorial for them. Has anybody had any experience with that was successful?
Amen.
Oh, okay. Sounds, thanks.
As a real experimentalist, online experiments are not the real thing.
Yeah.
So I don't think so. We've all struggled, I'm part of this integrated science freshman teaching program. We've generated a full suite of year-long online labs. They are no real substitute, and we will throw them away as soon as COVID is over, right? They are only a stopgap measure until we can get people doing real hands-on research again.
Okay, thanks, guys.
so we are at time, but there is an interesting discussion in the chat about paying the mentors for the different initiatives, and maybe this is something that can be continued in the further discussion. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Diana. You did a great job.
Thanks, Diana.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
So I think
come on,
now
everybody come for a very exciting final section in 10 minutes. The students that have run the tables, be prepared. You're going to be the first ones to come up with some proposals before everybody in. So be prepared for the next section. Okay. Thank you.
Do we want to do some breakout?
we can do a breakout but if y'all need to go stretch and get a Coke.
Yeah, I think let's do a bigger breakout just in case somebody wants to stretch to do that. If someone to hang out and say hi, then we do it in a breakout. Let's do a long breakout, a big breakout.
All right. Here we go.
Hello, welcome back. Right now, we are on our last session. So I'm going to say how to organize this town hall meeting. And first of all, Jose will be helping to conduct the Q&A, and I will field questions from chat. And Margie will going to share the screen with us. These are the suggestions from Roundtable. And then, of course, Jose will wanted to see what are the best actionable items because Jose and I were going to talk to Kristen this week. How do we convert, transform all this energy from this group into something that's real change in NSF? Okay. Margie, are you there?
Yeah, are you ready for me to share?
Yes, please.
Maybe we can do the first item as Mark can share, but we can get the students to run the roundtables to present what was their conclusions from the roundtables, right? Not just show up, flash out, maybe they can present their own perspective so we can get the young people to lead the session.
I think that'll be great. I'm not so sure if the hosts are here, but we can try. Arabin, are you there? Let me see if Arabin's here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so great. Why don't you like take 2 or 3 minutes to summarize what do you find on your table?
Sure. My table was about addressing imposter syndrome, where people do not feel that they belong in the certain environments that they're in, and that's primarily fueled by both internal and external factors. So we were discussing in our table both the ways it presents itself and how to address it as researchers ourselves, and how the system should be, meaning the lab and the department should come in place to help us. So if you scroll down further, the action points that are suggested, the interventions that are suggested. So at the level of institution, there should be peer support network, like weekly luncheons or something, where people are able to share that their vulnerabilities, or this experiment didn't do well and I'm trying to figure this out. I remember there was also a message board that another group presented recently, which was also helpful in exchange of ideas. And in terms of institutional help, the idea of toxic work culture also came up in trying to understand and ensure that URMs, underrepresented minorities, feel comfortable in a workplace environment. And that was one thing that was discussed. And personal effort, the key thing was to count your positive feedback that you get, document them. And the other thing is to also use the negative criticism as a pivot to improve your own abilities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Do we want to take Q&A afterwards? Or Jose, how do you want to do that?
I think
We'll
it's a
do
good
one by
idea.
one?
We go over everybody, and then there's going to be overlap, and then we do a Q&A on that for them.
Okay, great. The next host is Jules. Let me just tell you that these hosts are volunteers from PoLS, and these are the topics that they come up by themselves that they think is most important to them. So kudos to students. Jules, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, could you please summarize what you're finding on your table?
Sure. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to summarize what we talked about during the roundtable. My name is again Jules Belendi Kenyi. On my roundtable, it was question to. We talked about how to promote the minority participation in conferences, and we first, the first question we had was to, how to get those minority in our, in our research before we can promote them to those conferences. Jose has a very good idea. Like we can organize. We can organize seminar. We can organize talks, student talks, such as the one we have at the CTBP, to encourage a student to have a talk, so that I can prepare them. It can also prepare the student the student connection. And also we talked about how to how to promote, how to organize the summer workshops so that it can get a student involved in a STEM field. This way, this way, this way it will allow those underrepresented students to get involved in a STEM field. We also exchange about how to recruit those students. Like we should change the way we recruit. So we should change the way we recruit the student. We should be more aggressive. We should go to those students and trying to give them the advantages of being in a STEM field. And also, we should not rely only on GPA and GRE. We should also mostly rely on a student background. So these are the main points we discussed during the roundtable. Thank you.
Thank you, Jules. Next table will be, is David here? David here? Some students are taking classes. I'm not so sure if they are here. Is David?
I don't think David is here.
Who else has joined David's table?
I can briefly summarize.
Yeah, you're there. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, there were 4 of us at this table.
Yes, yes.
So the primary thing we discussed at this table was the perception of what one can do with a physics degree. And at least if physics is perceived as something which is not financially lucrative, we are likely to lose out on participation from people very early on in middle schools or high schools. So what can we as the PoLS community do? One of the things we discussed was using the alumni database, not just of PoLS, but of our departments and universities, to go and talk to draw upon these alumni to come and talk to students in schools, community colleges about firstly, what is physics and what can be done with a physics degree that is not just the track to getting a professor's job. And this is especially important if somebody is growing up without seeing any role models in science. So the idea is mainly to provide role models for students at various stages.
Thank you very much, Katob. And the last table was organized by SACNAS. Do we have any representative from this table?
I think they're not here, but I talked to them, so I could briefly describe what we talked about.
Sure, thanks. Great.
So SACNAS is the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in Science. And they have a very active group at the University of Houston. I've worked with them in a number of cases for both undergraduate outreach as well as high school outreach. And so partially they were talking about some of the other programs that they've been working on. In particular, activities through the University of Houston's Office of Undergraduate Research to get undergrads more involved in research at the University of Houston. Helping students drafting their CVs and drafting letters to PIs so that they're more prepared to get involved directly in research. And one of the things that I found really interesting, and this was a big problem that we had in the FIS program that was fully online this year, is the difficulty of just not being able to interact with people. And so SACNAS students are very, they join what's called a Discord server to play a very popular video game called Among Us right now. But they spend hours just interacting with each other, talking to each other and feeling some sort of sense of community. And so it's based off of the conversations that they had at the table. I think this is something that was potentially very valuable for giving a sense of community and belonging in science, and also just helping people stay sane. Let's see. Yeah, generally speaking, so SACNAS is managed by graduate students at the University of Houston that were former undergraduates at the University of Houston that were involved in research. And so they can speak very honestly and believably about the research experience and the transition into grad school. So it really is an excellent group at the University of Houston.
Thank you, Greg.
Mhm.
That will be the roundtable from yesterday. And how about the roundtable from today? Tab, are you there? Is Tab here? Oh, Tab, you're here. You're muted, Tab. Would you like to summarize?
Yeah, I can summarize. It was my student is here about research, and I'm at a little school, so we got to talk shop in a minute. I got this thing on. But what we talked about, and it was really interesting because, right, our discussion was initially about how to build these pathways from high school to college, and then college to graduate school and beyond. But what seemed to happen with the group that congregated there, and we really talked about, really focused on having that sense of belonging. And so because that was kind of absent or um, uh, sort of, I guess what it is, even with myself in physics, if you don't pursue the traditional path in physics, you're not necessarily visualized as continuing on to the professoriate, or maybe you don't want to continue on. So what are other options that students can pursue at whatever level they are to still contribute to the field, but not necessarily move towards industry or the professoriate? And so kind of to build either a network or a website or some additional, just to show other options where you're still working in the field, but not necessarily pursuing those traditional avenues of physics.
I see. Yeah. Thank you very much, Tab. The next table will be mentoring for diversity, inclusion, and equity. Is Kate here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Please help summarize items from your table.
Sure. So in terms of thinking about what the PoLS network institutions could do, our roundtable came up with the ideas that as diversity, equity, inclusion, the ideas of all of that has changed over time. And so not only to have training that could be accessed within the PoLS network, but have training that adapts over time. And I don't want to, it's difficult to say that mentor training should be a requirement, because if someone's not receptive to it, right, they're not going to get as much out of it. But to have like a continuing education requirement for, people who sign on to the PoLS network's, guidelines or the PoLS network's values. So really coming up with training that can be accessed, maybe a set of values or guidelines or recommendations for mentoring. And if this is done at the institution, the multi-institutional level, it wouldn't put so much burden on like each school to come up with their own program, but maybe funding could be shared between the institutions to make mentor training that, that allows for the best mentoring at the time, because we're learning constantly how to improve. And a way to assess whether that works is to not only allow, not only have an assessment of if it works, but an assessment for each institution to kind of decide or each department to decide on what areas really need to be worked on through a survey, and then have a post program assessment on how those things have worked. So summary is training and feedback, and basically adaptive training over time.
Thank you so much, Kate. That's fantastic. Our next table topic is what to look for in a mentor. Is Ms. Calamer here? Are you here? I think she might have classes.
I think she was the only one at that table. I was there for the luncheon, but she put some nice notes here, and she's a fourth year PhD at the moment. And I think one of the things she emphasized for herself, that your own advisor may not be the mentor that you need. and so to look for mentors also outside and for your maybe personal support. And so she put some notes in here, the things that she had brought up. So mentors and advisors are not necessarily synonymous. I can't change this myself. And she feels like she found a good mentor. I don't exactly, it was one of the grad students, I think, right now. You see, so relationships can't be forced. And I guess I can't see the rest of these. Can someone move this? That some of the mentors really didn't seem to have an interest in being a mentor, but they were chosen for some of the students. And she's mentoring some other grad students that are doing it, and she felt that taught her a lot about it.
Oh, thank you very much for the insight. I think the last table is also sadness. Greg, I think the students are not here.
It was largely a similar discussion today. So essentially today they had new undergraduates that were joining. And so they essentially had a small meeting for SACNAS to describe how they can help these undergrads. So, but largely the stories were very similar.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the hosts, poll stakeholders for the thoughtful summary. I think we can unshare the screen by Margie. And Jose, would you like to lead some discussions and I can field the questions from chat?
Okay, I will try to say a few things that appear to be important for me as some actual items we can do for polls, as polls becoming active right now. So one of the main talks that come is a better integration between polls. Particularly, we all have programs training undergrads. How can we create a resource with all the name of these undergrads that come from underrepresented groups and publicize for every polls node as these kids apply to graduate school and things like that. So we can also get the students that come in our undergrad training programs and use that as a resource for graduate school. And I think we can use, and since we have an agreement, we can sort of work on getting these kids into graduate school, and we have going to have a pool of underrepresented parts and really try to push this pipeline as strong as we can. On the second regard, there's the idea of how can we have people that are recruited by some groups by different ways, but they may have mentoring in other institutions that we have to bring up. The third topic, I think, is how can we include high school teachers maybe into the PoLS network, both into the conference and maybe doing some research during the summer, and how can we support for that? If I come now to the discussion of the tables, there's a big discussion about career path. Just out of curiosity, I think that it's interesting to see the APS had some studies I saw many years ago. Actually, the average salary of a physicist is much higher than the average salary of an engineer. And so it's an interesting thing what you with a degree of physics can do, not only as a physicist, but in other areas, just because of the training that you have. I think there was the question about mentoring that I think has been raised here very carefully, the difference between advising and mentoring, or have multiple people being on the questions of mentoring. I think there is the sense of belonging and the need of, I think Charlene said about anti-racism. I just want to put a personal plug in here. Before I came to Rice, I used to run the Faculty Equity Committee at UCSD. And now things are much better, but 12, 13 years ago, you're starting to really be proactive on this area. And when you ask every department how they did, they always said, oh, our criteria is excellence. So I decided to do a poll, to do a survey from our faculty, say, okay, since your definition is excellence, why don't you define for me what excellence is? And I need less to say which kind of answers we get in terms of most of them, if you look like me, if you work on what I do, preferentially you have the same advisor. So anyway, so it's a very interesting question that comes to the topic what people said about I think there was a comment about people need to be retrained on what training and mentoring is on the new thing. I think there's a topic of discussion. We may want to go back to that discussion. And finally, I think there is the sense of belonging. That's something we have been working on it, but and I think that really get related to the fact people have now about systemic racism and what people say, a situation where you just don't feel comfortable, right? And that really exclude people from the process because you cannot really bring a level of comfort for them. These are things on my notes, but I'd like to see what other people have to say as we come along.
Yeah, I think because we only have, let's see, without fielding questions, do we have anybody talking over one another? Anybody want to talk? I do feel like for some faculty from minority serving institutions, they wish to be involved in a grant other than just passing emails along. I think that the message there is that they have to get paid like researchers or something because they really need some time to be involved in research to help the students, that is non-summer times. I thought this is something that actionable plans, some PIs from PWI can do.
And also, yeah, like you said, Margaret, the being involved also in the research. So maybe even if they're not being directly paid, but they're being incorporated into these research collaborations, not just sort of signing over their students to the PWI.
Yeah, I think I actually have the privilege to talk to every single speakers one-on-one and talk in depth about what they feel about it. I think one of the issues that they wouldn't want it just to be a stamp person who just signed the collaborator letter and suggest the name of students because that will get them NSF grants. They also want to be involved in research.
So I would like to ask a question for the young people that's still present here. I came with a list of topics. Would you guys to add other topics to the list or you like to elaborate on some of them? It would be great to hear from the young people because sometimes when we are trying to make decisions, when there's a group of polls trying to make, we can get great ideas from you. So someone want to comment on it, Base? Come on.
Yes, I want to talk. Yes, I want to.
Jules, okay, yeah.
Yes. Hi, I want to comment a little bit about the recruitment process. So how can we recruit those students, those underrepresented minority students? Usually it's like, they like to see something that looks like them. During the recruitment process, Jose talked about going to those institutions like TSU to talk to those students. I think going to those institutions with somebody that looks like them, somebody that can talk to them like one-to-one, we make them more comfortable to talk and to even listen to what is going on. And for that reason, I think during the recruitment process, during the aggressive recruitment process, we can include both students and PIs in the recruitment process, so that when we go to those institutions or those, I don't know, sometimes they do have like an annual meeting. So where they gather to talk about probably not science. So if you have to go there, we may have like some PIs and mostly students who may look like, who may look like them, so they can talk to them in a simple way. That way they feel. For me, coming from that background, I think it makes them to feel more comfortable and to really to be willing to listen to what is going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Jewel.
Caitlin.
Jose, I just building on his great suggestion. I wonder if you could talk about how the network could be leveraged, because if we're thinking specifically about Black scientists in physics of living systems, any one node may have a very small number of faculty, graduate students, postdocs. But could the network be leveraged for some of these recruiting efforts?
I think that's a very good point. If we could sort of create different groups, the underrepresented groups in the entire network, and they can share their experiences. So for example, if you can have a Hispanic group or Native American or African American, but we can get these different people, since they're exposed, they come from the same background, but they're exposed to different institutions, they may be able to come and say what's good and bad from each institution. I think that's a very good idea. And then we can also use these people as a recruiting tool to do that. I think that the good point about your point also is, like I say, all these things require nucleation. Have enough people that actually can expose these people to the right experience, and maybe one node doesn't have it, but we may get nucleation by using the resource of all the networks. Margaret, that's a good area. I think that's a very good point that you have here.
Yeah, it's good. I'm writing it down.
Caitlin, now let's Caitlin talk. Do you have something to say?
Yes. Sorry, my internet won't allow me to have my video on right now and talk to y'all. But I think that it's important when we're talking about recruitment, whether it's to grad school or even from high school, but particularly thinking about into grad school, is if we have PIs or advisors, faculty who didn't take a straight traditional path to where they are. The ones who can understand the students who have had to take time off of their academic pursuits and come back to school later. The ones who have had to work through school or raise children through school. I think it's important to hear from people who have overcome those barriers on the other side and say, look, I didn't have the best grades or the best GPA. I had to divide my attentions. I had to do all of these other things, but you can still, get your PhD. You can still get a degree in science. You can still pursue a career in science, and you'll find a place for you. Because I know I didn't have that coming up as a student. And it's only now, towards the end of my graduate career, that I see how many amazing scientists there are out there who had these similar meandering paths. And I think that's something that needs to be shared.
I think that's a very good point. I think we should add that. The other thing is, that's why I think the second topic we said about creating a list of undergrads and promote them to graduate school is very important, because we have a non-traditional way of recruiting people. And then after getting their experience, we can also use the network to promote them as they apply to grad school or jobs. So, and I think the idea of sharing experience is very, very important, because if you don't learn, how do people say, if you don't learn from history, you're going to repeat the errors, right? So it's very important to learn from what we have done.
Yeah, and Jose, I also think the PoLS institutes and in the physics frontier centers can help with also teaching of the science teachers for high school and junior high. I know my junior high science teacher was key for me wanting to go into science. And when we would have them here to University of Illinois, first time I was so dismayed how little science they really knew and loved, even by the modern topics. If there's anything we can do to...
We can do it. Margaret, why don't you say a little bit more? Because Margaret has been working with Eric Mazur between relating PoLS and PoLS-T. And I think that's an area you want to grow. So I think a very good point, Zen. There are lots of things that can come. There are lots of low-hanging fruits that we can do already with the resource we have.
Yeah, I think that Eric is actually gathering all of these network. I think that we can just use your information and grow the ecosystem. And I think one of the items that Dr. McNeese mentioned, I thought that was very interesting. that's probably we can consider is to have the PoLS graduate students or postdoc to teach at HBCUs for a quarter semester as a way to nurture students or help students to get to research part. Because if you think about UH, and we have HTC that can help us, work with a lot of the students who wanted to get into this path, but it's a non-trivial work. And for the HBCUs, usually the professors are too overworked. I wonder if it's possible that a PoLS can have a cohort of students, I guess it had to be paid to teach, or guest teach, that somehow can mentor their students and help them, like how Jeff helped their students. And before they come to the summer program, at least they have some kind of preparedness before they start the projects.
Okay.
Is that possible? It seems very expensive.
You have to think about it, but you should put on the list. I have a couple people here from the young people. I think Kostub, do you want to speak now?
Yep. So I was wondering what everyone thought about, in addition to outreach activities, sort of introspective activities. So presumably, I mean, we're also through the PoLS network training future gatekeepers, and all of us come to graduate school with our own biases. And I grew up in India, and even though I've never experienced anything, I've still watched Hollywood movies. So I come with some preconceived notions that I'm not aware of always. So whether we can do some kind of implicit bias trainings through Zoom or through individual PoLS networks, or maybe even at the annual meetings where we break out into small groups, have someone facilitate a discussion and at least become aware of our biases and then work towards overcoming them.
I think that's a very good point. And Charlene probably gave a good idea about getting these sort of different groups from different backgrounds around the network, and maybe having these different groups presenting for everybody about their own perspective would be a good idea. Maybe all these coupled together, I think maybe an interesting resource they can do. That's a good point.
Kareem also raised your hand.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a seed of an idea, but it comes from, I guess, like a broadly like recruitment type of thing. And like, it comes from the question, like, how can we make science viral? So in a sense, like, for example, I got into science from a YouTube video of watching The Elegant Universe by Brian Greene. And while I was in high school. So the question is like, we have TikTok, Instagram, all these like routes of like social media. Is there like are there funds? Can we create like a social media engine that can produce content that attracts young people? It's like casting a broad net, and then like of the people that come, like everything that we've been talking about, the systems that we've created will be there to greet them and help them figure out what they want to do. Because first you want to stimulate their imagination, and then once their imagination is stimulated in the context of science, then you have the institutionalized kind of like system ready to help them make their imagination like concrete. So that's kind of my question, or maybe my comment.
Thank you.
And since I've been managing the social media for PoLS, I'll just say that I love your idea. I think it'd be great, even what we do in the physics department, sometimes they will let the undergraduates take over the Instagram account. So it would be really cool to have something like that where each PoLS node sort of takes over the Instagram or takes over Twitter or something, and really gets their students involved.
But Charlene, for example, the meeting you organized last year on the educational meeting of PoLS, if we can sort of make those things produced a little bit more better and really put that virtually to people, that was an amazing meeting. I really sat on the back and learned so much about how presenting, how to do things. So I think these are ways that goes in that direction, right? We actually had some things you actually did organize that thing with Zen, and I think it's a kind of thing we can make it more popular.
And maybe this is like an idealization, but my kind of dream is to have a sort of like cosmos of the living systems like show on TV, like kind of like having the, you know, like I think if we all come together and put our resources together, that would be something that we could all do that makes a big impact. Yeah, so that's.
Could I say something? This is Dave Thurmalay. When I was in IPST, which I still consider to be part of, we hired, thanks to the effort of one person, in fact, an African American chemical engineer who was just fantastic, Michael Harris. And in the small building where we were, Arpita is still in that building. No, maybe she's not. I don't know. She's not. In the building, we saw huge number, a literally huge number of African American students, postdocs, undergrads. Michael, for some personal reason, had to go back to his home state, and he took a job in Purdue, where he's an associate dean now of engineering, or at least he was the last time I checked. And then, like a phase transition, all these people disappeared. This was sort of alluded to by many people in this meeting. So the importance of role models, not advisors, as it were, is important. And even in this meeting, we saw Marta McNeese, we saw Sandra McGuire, and although she's not African-American, we saw Lee Limbaugh today with her experiences. And so once in a while, in our PoLS meeting, which we have, we could ask these people to come and talk to us. And in fact, you could also ask people like Michael Harris. And ACS Jax just hired one of the associate editors, was a distinguished chemist, was an African American. So we can ask once in a while for them to talk about their experiences, how they are reaching out, and thereby expand the role model part of iPoLS and its various incarnations.
I agree. I think that if we really ask ourselves a question, does the iPoLS network represents the demographic of our undergraduate students or high school students? Probably there's a gap.
This is Garrick Papoy. I'd like to make a comment. Maybe it was discussed. I was teaching today in the morning. Maybe I missed some of the discussion. It's about HBCUs, but in terms of their graduate programs, there are some universities in our area. There's Howard University that have graduate programs, and the possibility of integrating them at the level of research collaborations. So instead of even in addition to recruiting students from there, or also directly engaging research groups in multi-PI research collaborations and grants. I wonder if that's an avenue that you guys have discussed and whether it's worth pursuing that at the level of graduate.
I think Margaret talked a little bit about it today, and I'm going to plagiarize her. Our interactions that we have had with basically the real success we have had with the University of Houston has been because people like Margaret and Greg, they also have been involved in the science of the center. So you're recruiting their students, but also there's the people from that institutions are involved in research with us. And I think the point you're trying to raise is very important, that basically that you feel that everybody's part of the effort, everybody feels ownership. You're not just trying to suck up people out of there and with no return. So I think the idea of having the full institution doing ownership, and we're trying to work with and Margaret's trying to work a similar effort with the Houston community colleges. How can we actually integrate those people in a better way? And now we are having this effort with TSUs, with Texas Southern University. But I think the point is well taken. I think success in these programs or interactive institutions require the participation of everybody, and not just a sort of go and select a couple people, bring it to your place, and then close the door. I think that's a well-taken point, but takes a lot of energy. And that's something that PoLS has been discussing, and Margie has been involved on that. She knows how much energy it takes these things to get done.
And even integrate those groups into research grants and so on.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I think the key thing has to pay them. I mean, even if it's not co-op, but at least pay, because the teaching load at these minority serving institutes is really a lot. Yeah, if you wanted to, the one thing that at the CTPP is that CTPP pays the PIs, me and Greg, to involve in research, and that really makes a difference, because they allow me to not teach as much, so I can be engaged in research and also mentor students, and that take a lot of time as well.
And Margaret, maybe those are kind of things that you guys could put together as best practices document that other centers, not even biophysics, could.
So, for example, in most of the institutions, the faculty requires to teach summer courses in order to survive.
Yeah.
So you can come up with some mechanisms for summer salary. You can really have them at least more active, participate with you during the summer. That's why in the center we try to make sure everybody involved gets doing that, based part of the resource. But that's a best practice you can do, and I think that's something we can start to work with the research funding, so that people can actually come and be part of research, at least during the summer when they don't have the three-course load, and then we can avoid them to sort of stay out of teaching for that and be involved and coming together with the trainees to be part of the training during the summer.
Yeah, it's a win-win situation, right? Because that kind of alleviates her from intense teaching, and now most of our efforts can help bridge the gap between the PWIs and MSIs. Sorry, I use acronyms.
I wanted to maybe piggyback off of that last comment and say that I was hoping, out of this meeting and all of these discussions, that the PoLS network, that we would be sort of a force for change and to compile best practices, in particular for funding agencies, to realize that, if we're going to be, like you said, working with historically Black universities, that, the collaboration needs to be funded in a way that makes it worth it also for them. And all of the other things that we've talked about. Is there a plan to sort of put together maybe something like your white paper you prepared last time, Margaret? Is there a plan to put something like that we could send to NSF program officers or something?
Yeah, so one thing is about how to make this network, this synergy. I got lots of positive feedback. Can we go forward? How can we transfer this energy into something? Because usually asking like teachers to make extra effort, asking faculty from Minority Serving Institute or HBCUs do extra effort, that needs to have to pay their time. So Jose, do you think that this is something that we can actually have the Kristan to support something more of those?
I think we should break. You're putting a short report together, right? So I think it's very important that we divide into two parts. So what we can do is the resource we have now. Okay. Can we use some of the money we have now to do some pilot programs? And then if these pilot programs work, then we can ask for additional funding afterwards. But we should break into two parts. And I think that's the way you can be more effective as you communicate with the NSF part, who has been very interested on that part.
Yes.
I think they're very interested, but I think if we can do a couple pilot programs where it sort of can scream from cutting from the top of what we have now, make these things work, then I think they'll be very receptive to a larger program afterwards.
Yeah, for example, like Arpita and I have discussed intensively about this. Some university, even though there's a node, but they are not as resourceful as a PFC center. So is there any way, like a supplement Arpita, do you wanted to talk more about?
I mean, this was a question that I had also. And so just a couple of points that I wanted to make to this group. One is just a small actionable item. Could we have some sort of website where the resources that we heard about, in the last 2 days could be put together? If I or someone else says, hey, we heard a great talk by this person, and there were all these resources they talked about, or what they do. So if we could we create some kind of PoLS network website where this information was shared? And the other question what Jose asked, what can be done?
Margie already had to do it, but we have to work with her to make.
I can do that.
Right. And the question is exactly, yeah, how as Jose pointed out, like how do we work, what can be done with the current resources and what can be done beyond, because to have a sustainable effort, there's some sort of funding that is required, to even pay summer stipend for the students, to get some administrative support. And I think this is a discussion that needs to be had. My other point that I just wanted to point out is, what can we do specifically as Physics of Living Systems Network? I feel that our outreach can be broad compared to other areas of physics, for example. Like we've been working, some of us, with some aspects from our physics departments. But here I feel we can reach maybe a wider audience, students who don't know that biophysics is part of physics. I mean, I think that a lot of times students don't even realize that in middle school or high school or even an undergraduate. So how can we leverage our unique capabilities in this interdisciplinary field to really broaden our outreach? I mean, that's just a question I have for the group. And we could, for example, share things that other nodes are doing in terms of modules and, little projects and things like that.
So in that regard, we always, on every meeting and every action, we have a limited amount of resource, Margie knows better, for bringing students that don't belong to the network into our activities, right? So the question is, how can we better use that? This has been done in a kind of informal way, depending on people that apply and things like that, but we can formalize and be more aggressive on some direction we want to do about that. And then if we have a pilot program works on that, then we can sort of tell the funding agents, how can we amplify that program? But we do that on sort of with some concrete data in hand.
So I like to bring this attention to you, Jose, is that Dr. Lindbergh actually mentioned that there are research done at HBCUs. So the key is to have a joint collaborative research to send students to learn new techniques and then come back and collaborate. And I do want to point out that PoLS, one of the function of PoLS is indeed to do this. But now, as you said, a lot of the funding are used between PWIs. So something like what Jose mentioned, what can we do now is to open this resource opportunity to HBCUs. So HBCU students can come to PWIs and learn a technique or learn a computer program, and they can, enhance collaborations between faculty this way. So whatever being done that is already happening in PWIs, we can extend that to HBCUs and MSIs. Would that be an all right suggestion, Dr. Lindbergh?
Yeah, so there you go. Yeah, I think I think the context is everything. So there may be HBCUs where people have absolutely no research going on, and I understand how that could happen. But that's not true of a lot of HBCUs. Certainly NSF has this whole program, HBCU Up, which funds investigators and HBCU-wide centers. And so I guess on behalf of my colleagues, I have been offended occasionally when national labs, for example, will reach out to our faculty and tell them what they should be working on when they already have a couple NSF grants and an NIH grant. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I know.
Yeah. So I think it's very different. There may be other faculty who would love to come spend the summer at a PWI and re-jump their research interests, but I think it has to be done in a context specific way. And I think it requires, I just think it requires some thoughtfulness. Earlier, I was going to talk about the fact that when you were mentioning having students and postdocs teach at HBCU. So because Vanderbilt is so close, they have a postdoc program where 25% of a postdoc salary is to do some teaching at minority serving institutions, but 25% effort is not nearly enough for someone to teach a course. I mean, and I think all of you know this, it's no longer you go into a room and go wah, 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 wah for an hour and you leave. I mean, it's creating a lot of online tools and flipping the classroom, having discussion groups, having quizzes every day to help students get a sense of I'm getting it or I'm not getting it. And for postdocs with no teaching experience, this could deep six their postdoc productivity and screw them for the future, just like graduate students. So I think having them there is good. Taking the responsibility for teaching a course, that's a huge, huge time commitment. So I would suggest maybe they could, what we found works really well is they pop over and they're in the lab with students, because our labs are all question oriented. I don't know if you call it that, but they're authentic research embedded into course associated labs. So that, you know, having a couple postdocs or a couple grad students in there talking with students, one, they're helping them, giving them more individual help, but they're developing some relationships. And doing that, not maybe for a whole semester when they'd have to be there 6 hours a week, but just popping in and out for certain lab experiments where they have a little expertise, maybe that would work. And then the last question I have is really, so I'm ignorant here, as you know, because I'm really a biochemist kind of person. But if the PoLS mission is for students in a physics background to gain more biological experience, like what are the important problems to solve, and then some strategies that are used in the bio community, is there not a rich bio community associated with you that's non-physics and background? Because if you look at the diversity of people getting PhDs in the biological sciences, they're much more diverse, higher range of diversity. So that when someone said before, we have very few Black students, faculty, yes, but are your collaborating bio partners? Is there an opportunity there to enrich the diversity of your community? And when those bio people are out there at Abercams and SACNAS and these bio, you know, they might not be going to APS or BP, the Black Physicists Society meeting, but they might be going to ASBMB, cell biology, and there are very large minority graduate and postdoctoral programs there that are meeting. So I'm just wondering I'm just trying to figure out how bi-directional this PoLS is, right? PoLS. Is it physicists collaborating with biologists, or is it physicists training physics people bio so they can, you know, if it's really reciprocal, you might have a rich community there to diversify the PoLS group.
So well, in most of our minds, including the two chairs we have, this is very reciprocal. I think many of us look to the biology for the problems and might use the physics methods or physical chemistry methods, but I think we couldn't do it any other way. It's not a fiefdom we have created just to have fun without thinking about real problems.
But I think the problems are definitely reciprocal, but I think, as Dr. Limburg mentioned, having, and this is sort of what I was alluding to, that there is a lot of diversity in biology. And is there something we can partner with them to increase our outreach? And I don't think we do that, at least in a very overt way all of the time. So
But Arpita, let me try to set, I think that's I really, thank you for your comment. That was fantastic. And I think it's good to have an outsider sort of pushing the insiders on how, what appears apparent when you look. When the postgraduate student network was created, every group involved in this network has a strong collaboration with the people in the life science they collaborate with. The reason network was created that most of our students, although we collaborate with the life sciences, we all had students that came from physics departments. And these students felt very isolated. Although they interact with biology, they felt on their own physics community they're isolated. So the PoLS network, created by bringing these students that were officially in the physics department, collaborate with people in the life science, but they create a community of like, we came from physics, we are interested in life sciences, how can we bring a joint community? And that has been very successful. That doesn't replace the collaboration you're talking about. Our students go for all these other meetings also. But the PoLS meeting is sort of people that come from similar training to come together. That solves one problem. That is people with different training, but didn't solve the problem of how do we make this group. There are students interested in life science, they come from original physical training, how we make this group more diverse. And that's, I think, what comes. Now, your idea is very important, basically. We can use people from other communities to help to nucleate that into our community. I think that's a very good suggestion. There has not been problem not being explored sufficiently by us.
Maybe we can invite her to give a talk to the PoLS meeting, right?
Yes.
Margie can reach out to Dr. Limbert and ask her to give a talk to us.
Yes, definitely.
But thank you very much. That's a very good point. And I think it's this sort of these multiple relationships that can be synergized. They haven't been synergized. And I think that's a real refreshing point that you have raised for these people here.
Yes, it's been like 14 years since the inception of PoLS, right?
Yes, PoLS starts small. We have been growing small. Now I think
now we can get to a point that interacting with biology community is possible now.
No, the interactions biology community exists, I think, but the question is, like Margie, I think, presented well during her presentation, we have been trying to create a community of students in the physics department that are interested in problems in the life sciences, and to have these students to share their experiences. And that I think we achieve now. I think we are very mature network on that regard. So now I think we feel that we can address the question of diversity in a solid grounds. That has been done informally until now, but these things don't work informally. That's something we learn in life. These things require energy, require planning, and I think that's what it has been into the table for discussion.
So another point I wanted to mention, and I don't know if Kate O'Neill might, Kate and I were talking, and we were thinking, would it be possible to think about some sort of an undergraduate underrepresented minority conference that would be geared, basically focused on physics of living systems topics. It's just literally, we just didn't have a long conversation on it, but similar to the CU WIP or CU2 MIP that UMD and NIST do, I mean, that's all areas of physics. Is that something that we can start thinking about, where it would really bring topics of biophysics, physics of living systems to the undergraduate, underrepresented minority community? And then there was a whole set of chats that were going on earlier in the Zoom chat about, there was some enthusiasm about social media and shows and these popular shows that are done for other areas in physics. So if something like that could be done to really bring physics of living systems out into the community.
Yeah, just to add to that, something that Arpita and I had talked about together was, so UMD has hosted the CU WIP and CU2 MIP conferences before, but I know that UMD had to apply for that. So what if some of the different institutions within the PoLS network did the same thing? And then we could have some of the same programming, you know, across institutions to specifically highlight biophysics type research.
On the last few minutes, Margaret, you are trying to put a small white paper with all the discussion of the meeting. How do you want people to contribute, send their ideas to you as you put this together? Are you going to put something on Slack and then they comment, or you want them to email some stuff to you as you put all together? How do you want to proceed? How do things going to help you?
I think that'll be great. What I'm going to do is, and I wish you're going to put on Slack, and then I think there's lots of messages to put on chat here, but it's not going. I think that if you could kindly copy and paste and collecting some, put on Slack, that would be great. And I will create a channel. Is it a channel called Town Hall? No, I will create a channel called Town Hall. And please continue with that synchronously, okay?
Right, but we want to, in the end, to have something we can offer to the NSF for people like that. How do you're going to get that from that channel and convert to a small white paper? What's the plan here?
What I could do is that I can organize that into a Google Doc, and just like we did it for the white paper, and then we can have all the stakeholders to come and take a look at it, and given like 2 weeks period, and then the organizers and then the board of members can distill that into something that's more presentable.
And could we, so as Jose pointed out earlier, it would be really good to know, people's thoughts on what can be done without any additional funding at this point in time, and what can be done with additional funding and support, because all of these activities require personnel and funding.
I think
because everybody's got a full-time job already, right?
No, but the idea of sharing resources, create a network of all the students, all the minority students, so we can use that to project to graduate school. All these things can be done with the current resources. Bringing high school teachers into some will require additional funds. So I think there are a few things that we can do, and we'll try to do that. That's very important that Margaret's going to write that together. I'll help her as I can. But it's very important that people go and comment on this Google Doc or Slack that she's doing, so you get input from everybody else.
But even to recruit undergraduate students for research and collaborative research also requires funding. So I think it's important to point out, even to start something, it requires some amount of funding.
That's correct.
Yeah, I think definitely something can be done immediately, and something can be done that requires money. I think every PI has their own things that they wanted to do. So I will just group it into two.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I think, how do we do about time?
We are on time now, unless someone has any additional comment.
Margaret, thank you for a fabulous job.
Thank you everyone for the
Margaret,
participation.
thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Charlene. Thank you, Margie and Kristan, and all the PIs of the notes to give all these ideas, and PoLS students volunteering your time and your dedication. Without you and participants, without you, it's not going to happen. And thank all of the speakers to give all these refreshing ideas. And Chris Barr is an evaluator, will send us a proposed survey. Please, please fill them up, because I often rely on these surveys to improve and inform us what to do next. And I'll continue the asynchronous discussion on Slack. Okay.
Is a Slack URL made available, or you're gonna create?
Okay, let me do it now. So Dave, you will be here. Let me just copy. You can just click on it. I'm going to put it here. Dave, click on it and you'll work. It's like a chat. So you can work on your smartphone, tablets, and computer. Mm-hmm. Emails, it's getting too difficult to manage when we have like 100 people and then information get lost. And chat, at least all the information are categorized and it's still there and searchable after you log out and log back in.
It would be nice to have some channels maybe associated with the points that Jose spelled out at the beginning of this town hall.
Charlene, do you want to help me? Because
I'd be happy to
create
help.
a new channel
Yeah.
for me. I think that this is
Yeah.
all the members are having this privilege to create channels. I might miss a few items, even though I jot down 15 of them. So just go ahead and create that. If I miss anything, it happened.